It's the South China Sea, which they think is an internal lake to China. And when they block that off, Korea and Japan fall like ripened fruit. Okay? And then we've got Australia, which is carved off, in India. And the United States is pushed out of Asia for the first time in 150 or 200 years. The 21st century is the Asian century. And the United States is an Asian and Pacific power. And we have allies. And if we're pushed off of that, just like people in 1938, when guys would tell them about it, say, hey, Czechoslovakia's got nothing to do with me. I live in Kansas. I live in Iowa. I live in Ohio. What do I care about Austria? What do I care about Czechoslovakia? 3.5 years after, maybe 4 years, about 3.5 years after Austria, in Munich, in Czechoslovakia, and all of it, American kids were landing in North Africa, okay, and then Sicily. And then Italy, and then Normandy, in Guadalcanal, in Wake Island, in Midway, in all of it, the Coral Sea. It's coming. If we don't stop them now, all of that's going to happen. You're going to have a replay, and here's why. This is the unfinished work of the 20th century. This is the last group of big gangsters, okay? Just like Mussolini, just like Hitler, right? Just like the Soviets. This is the last group. Now, we cut a deal with them in the 70s to take down our other enemy, the Soviets. Because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The Soviets, Joseph Stalin was our partner to take down Hitler and Mussolini. Now it's time for the confrontation, and it's here. And their signal, and we're going to get Jason Miller, our co-host, is going to get on. He was on this call with Mike Pompeo yesterday. I think Pompeo I disagree with Tom Friedman. I think Mike Pompeo is a brilliant Secretary of State. We're going to get the inside scoop of Mike Pompeo. But the big takeaway, I believe, and this we got to smoke them out, the CCP saying, hey, we don't care. We're going to hunker down in China and on the Eurasian landmass with Pakistan and Iran and Turkey and Russia. We're going to consolidate this. And we don't care if was that Jack Maxey? That was, no, just teasing. Our co-host, we don't care. We don't care if our growth is 2% versus 8%. We don't need the West. We've decoupled technologically, and now we're going to decouple from the capital markets. And we're going to decouple from the American market. Hey, guess what? Yeah, we can get 10% growth or 12% growth if we're in America, but guess what? It's not as important as shutting down democracy and freedom in Hong Kong and Taiwan and Singapore and all of it. Korea, Japan, the whole deal. Because it's coming. Jason Miller, you were there with Mike Pompeo yesterday in this call. Walk us through what Secretary Pompeo said.
Yeah, Steve and team, it was pretty powerful what Secretary Pompeo had to say yesterday. And he was doing a bit of a briefing call and overview of what's going on with Hong Kong and spoke very specifically to this removing the trade status of Hong Kong. He did say that this is part of an annual review. And so the timing of this does come up right when we're seeing all these violations of human rights and China taking over Hong Kong. But he also made clear that he's in communication with a number of other world leaders. He said Dominic Raab from the UK, mentioned a number of other leaders around the world. So this isn't happening in a complete vacuum. But he called out the CCP in very specific ways. And he went through and said, look, the Chinese government's behavior has to change if we're going to look at things differently. They can't be violating human rights. They can't be violating the trade agreements. They can't be stealing our intellectual property. They can't be weaponizing. He said this is places where they've broken their trust in the past by weaponizing islands in the South China Sea, really call them out pretty specifically in a way that I hadn't heard in a while. But he also said, and this was a little bit of the buried lead, he said that there are some recommendations that are being put in front of President Trump, said President Trump is reviewing those now. And he inferred, he didn't formally announce it, but he did infer that there's going to be additional action coming up with regard to Hong Kong and China later. So stay tuned, but this sounds pretty powerful.
Read me the Jimmy Lai about the world's. He had a tweet about they need the world to stand up. Do you have that tweet, Jack?
Let me pull it up.
Yeah, and let me know when you have it, because this is important. We know President Trump has gone the extra mile to work with the CCP to try to integrate him into the world system. What does Jimmy Lai tell us?
CCP imposes the national security law on Hong Kong. World leaders, please show your support to Hong Kong by taking concrete actions. Words alone cannot change the mind of the dictator Xi Jinping.
Jason, you remember this, and President Trump said it in the State of the Union. This is the reason he's president of the United States. The managed decline of our country by our elites, most epitomized by the relationship with China and the Chinese Communist Party. Dan D'Amico is going to be on at the top of the hour to talk about manufacturing. How our entire manufacturing base went away, and now we're awakened to that. The whole American people are awakened to not just healthcare and pharmaceuticals, but the entire thing is sitting there. President Trump has made this a centerpiece, and particularly comparing, contrasting Joe Biden.